deliberately the broad area of my conversation with you is on global trade, the uncertainties, the prospects, the opportunities, and the challenges that would unfold as we go beyond the pandemic days in times to come, sooner rather than later. In that context, I would like to highlight few areas which are non-technical and a couple of areas that are technical, which should form the basis for research by all of you and us, because plurality of viewpoints on a particular area of research becomes very important, so that the same subject matter is viewed from different angles by different people with different experiences, and that helps creating value added knowledge in due course. Now, if you talk of this crisis, and I'll come to international trade in short while, this crisis is a humanitarian crisis. And this is not national, but it is global. And why I'm emphasizing this is because many a times the responses by countries, the responses within countries in a federal structure, I feel, do not suggest that we are all considering this to be a humanitarian crisis, do not suggest that we are considering this as a global crisis. And that is why I'm trying to reiterate this point, that this is a humanitarian crisis by which every country of the world is afflicted. And we have to understand that no other time the merits of global cooperation are more pronounced as it is now. And therefore, it is worth highlighting that this is a humanitarian crisis, and national governments uh, in a federal structure, and also governments in an international framework, global framework, must cooperate and come together to address this humanitarian crisis. That was point number one. Second is also linked to my assertion on this being a humanitarian crisis. And when I say this, I say this is also a crisis of human values. And because we all belong to social sciences, we are into economics. Uh, it is very important for us to understand that this is also a crisis of human values. And again, when I say that people are not understanding that this is a global crisis, this is a humanitarian crisis, this is not a crisis of one corner on this earth, because people are not understanding this, that brings to this second point, that people also must understand this is a crisis of human values, because we are not displaying the best human value system that we must, as an individual, as a country, and also as a global community. Thus far, we have not uh, shown, the world has not shown to the world that we have displayed the best possible human behavior that we would have expected it to do. Why do I say this? It has important linkages to economic development in different countries that are grappling with the pandemic, and also the role of international trade. But I would also go beyond international trade as well. There are various other flows, for instance, trade in goods, trade in services, foreign direct investment, technology, and movement of human resources, people across borders. So, trade in goods, trade in services, foreign direct investment, because investment is a very important determinant of economic growth, and not every country is resource rich from the capital point of view. So therefore, trade in goods, trade in services, foreign direct investment, technology flows, combined with movement of people across borders, will have to be viewed in an integrated manner in order to address this humanitarian crisis, in order to wipe off the virus from the face of this earth, And that will have to be done with the help of a sound human value system. Gone are the days when we have to be myopic and self centered. This is the time where we must have a large hearted approach to this larger than life crisis, quote unquote. And this is the responsibility of social scientists to highlight, because many a times these philosophical tenets of human existence that are actually trying to do business and interact internationally and try to earn profits, also providing employment, do not understand that this crisis must be taken as an opportunity to do further research in terms of increasing the human content of business nationally and internationally. And this is what I wanted to highlight. Coming to the international flows, that will be important, and also because India has all propounded, so to say, a vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. How international economics plays out in this context. Now, let me suggest that a vision of self-dependence in the realm of your own economic growth and development is a virtuous vision. It is a worthwhile objective. And there is no doubt that we need to be self-sustaining, self-reinforcing, self-sufficient, and self-dependent in the pursuits of economic development and growth. And this is very important. Having said that, uh, there is a lot of confusion in the minds of people that Atmanirbhar Bharat essentially means a paradigm of autarky. Now, that is not true. And as if you needed any other situation, this pandemic has only highlighted the merits of interdependence in terms of economic flows, the five types of economic flows that I just highlighted: trade in goods, trade in services, foreign direct investment in technology, and also human resources crossing borders. Uh, this pandemic has only highlighted that the importance of these flows, broadly encapsulated in the concept of international economics, becomes very important even when we move on with the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat in our country. So, what I'm saying is a very simple thing, that self dependence can coexist with international interdependence. There is no contradiction. Now, we have to decide how much, in which area, when, and over which time period we would be Atmanirbhar, and to what extent and by when. Till we are self dependent, we have to interact with the global community. But also there is a further layer to this argument which has to be kept in mind, and that is that even when you try to become self sufficient, self dependent, you need hand holding, and therefore international economic issues assume greater importance because there are external dimensions to the pursuits of economic dependence. So, just to give an example, you want to produce something in your own economy and you want to produce it locally, and you want to cater to your domestic market with made in India product. Now, to do that, it is possible that the capital and the managerial techniques or the technology or the business practices you would require from somewhere else, somewhere else that is more developed and they have a comparative advantage. So you invite that to your country so that that product is made in India. So this is one dimension where, in the pursuit of made in India, make in India, you have already collaborated internationally. So from the input side, you are actually providing an international content to your domestic endeavors of production and distribution and consumption within your own territory. Then the second part is from the output point of view. Once you have produced, say you have produced on your own, you have not taken any international help. There is a product which is homegrown, which is made in India. 100% it is domestic. It is always possible that because that product is so wonderful and it is made in India, you not only produce only for India, but you also allow other countries to consume your products. And that means essentially more business, more employment generation in the second round. So it is also possible that you produce something which is made in India, but you also export, and others benefit out of your innovation, your production, your quality, efficiency, price, globally as well. And I see this is something very wonderful, that made in India product, which is homegrown, actually is exported worldwide. So the short point is that we should not confuse Atmanirbhar vision of India as a model of autarky. It has very important external dimensions. It can have external dimensions of production from the supply side in terms of capital, technology, managerial practices, and so on. It can be uh, having connotations for international linkages from the output side, where you can do something which is purely Indian, but you export to the world, and the world benefits as well as much as Indians. And the third could be where both from input side, and then you produce domestically, and also from the output side you are actually connected with the world. So you have input side international connections to make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat vision, and also from the output side. So we have to see these strands of interactions of self-reliance and self-dependence within the overall context of international interdependence, and they can coexist, as I was mentioning. And this is an important area of research, and I would invite the research and teaching community of our own country through your platform to find out. There are certain very important questions in the minds of the policymakers, I guess, and you can also imagine questions, and have those questions for your future area of research. For instance, is it that in every line of production India should be Atmanirbhar, or we should be focusing on some? Now, this is a question somebody has to answer. Second is it that if we import something which is of a very small quantity, we do not require much, do we need to reinvent the wheel in terms of building a domestic capacity in that line of production also, or we can live with little bit of imports as well? That's another question. We should find out which are the areas, which are the sectors where international linkages are more as compared to domestic capacity to make in India, which are the sectors where we can have a much greater or the majority content which is made in India and only limited content which is international. Which are those sectors? We should be very clear. Then we should also find out what would be the time frame to become self-dependent, to achieve the vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. What is the time frame? For some products in some sectors, it is possible that you become self-dependent at a faster pace. For some products, you will require to forge, from raw material, intermediate goods, capital goods to the final product. Uh, you will require to forge these linkages over a period of time, and maybe you will be able to do this in a medium term. It is possible that there are certain lines where you would require a little longer time to become self-dependent. So we need to classify different sectors according to the time frame. I mean, which are those products where we can very quickly, gain self-dependence, which are those products where we require more time, and which are those segments where we require even more time. We need to be clear about it. Then, whichever product lines we require global cooperation, what is the nature of global cooperation? Do you only require technology or capital as well? Do you only require capital and nothing else? We have to be very clear, what is it that we require. Do you require only raw materials, because raw materials do not exist in your country, therefore you need to import, and nothing else is required, and after that, in this line of production, you can become self dependent. So what I'm trying to say is that these are all big areas of research whereby we need to prepare a template that, look, these are the sectors, within that these subsectors and subsectors, and in these specialized lines of production, uh, the requirement for India in terms of imports of goods, imports of services, foreign direct investment, technology, even professionals coming with managerial techniques and business practices which we might not have in a particular line of production. These are the things that we require. Uh, in this area, we require only this much. In this area, we require only this much time. So we need a template, and that will help the country to generate employment, because given the demographic dividend that India has been experiencing, it is very important for our country to actually generate employment. And when I say generating employment, that will come about only when we generate economic activity. And given the fact that output employment elasticities have not been uh, the way we would have expected in recent times, because of uh, increased use of capital intensive, technology intensive, and knowledge intensive choice of techniques, the output and employment linkage is not of a kind which we would have expected. And therefore, one way to enhance the quantum of employment across skill spectrums is to increase the size of the cake itself, size of the business itself within the country. And in that context, Atmanirbhar Bharat becomes very important. But as I said, not without external dimensions of trade, investment, technology, and human resources linkages. One more point I want to highlight in when I'm talking about employment, and that is that's very important. While India is experiencing demographic dividend, where we are going to have for some time the majority of our population, which is working age population, young population, this is matched by just the opposite of demographic transition that many countries, including in Asia, are experiencing. Their population is having, because of innovation, because of development, because of a very sanitized environment, uh, those countries are having a larger proportion of people who are outside the workforce. So aging population is a problem in many countries, but it's a good news from the point of view of higher life expectancy in those countries. Now, therefore, those countries will be requiring people. Those countries will be requiring young population to work and sustain their businesses. And here in India, we have demographic dividend. Now, we should be therefore having two-pronged employment generation strategy. One is to increase the size of economic activity within the country with the help of external dimensions. That is point number one, so that employment generation is possible along with profit generation in our country. And the second strategy should be that India should be signing within a free trade agreement a separate chapter with countries who are experiencing their demography being dominated by aging population, with them we should have a special partnership arrangement whereby different skill spectrums can be, connected with their economies from India to their economies, and our people can also find job right from unskilled to semi-skilled to medium skilled to high skill. The entire spectrum of population of our country, especially the youth, should be in a position under a proper employment and trade linkage kind of an agreement under FTA with different countries, whereby our people should be provided uh, work permits, longer work permits across different services area where we have, the young population. So what will happen is that this demographic dividend we will be able to reap in terms of providing employment, not only within our own country, by increasing the size of the economic cake, but also forging important trade and employment linkages with countries where they require different skill spectrums and expertise from a country like India. And just to highlight, in trade in services, there are four modes through which we trade. And in all four modes, there is something which crosses the border. That's why it's called trade. So mode one is actually when products cross border, and in those products you have embedded services. So in earlier times, for instance, a DVD with a Hollywood movie used to cross border, and uh, or a software in a DVD would cross borders. The price of the DVD may be, $1 or less than $1, but the software embedded in that DVD which crossed the border could have been, $100,000 of software design, architectural design, whatever. So earlier, services used to be embedded in products and they used to cross borders. That used to be called mode one of services trade. Similarly, the business process outsourcing, the KPOs, etc., they were being provided, digitally. And country like India through IT and ITS, we provided services and we received payments against that. That also came in mode one. But in mode two, students and tourists, for instance, would cross border to go and study and maybe travel for tourism purposes to different countries. And when you are there, you incur expenses to your hotel, to your residences, to you go to a restaurant and eat, and you make payment. You would have visited a doctor, you would have made a payment. You would have traveled through a transport, you would have made a payment. Now all those payments which people go abroad and make and then come back is in a way import by our country from that country of various services, because this is called consumption abroad. When you go to another country as a tourist, as a student, you consume abroad, and to that extent the payments that you made to that country, you have, by that extent imported those services to your country because you have made the payments, and the payments have remained in that country, so that country has been able to export services. So this is called mode 2 of trading services, where people cross the borders. And here, people meaning largely students and tourists, etc. Then you have mode 3, where instead of a product or people like students and tourists crossing borders, capital crosses borders. So any foreign direct investment or any transaction between the parent firm and its affiliates, foreign affiliates, this transaction or crossing of border of capital, foreign capital from one country A to country B is captioned as, you know, mode 3. So for instance, a country might invest in building a hospital in another country, and the capital traveling from country A to country B would be, recorded in mode 3. And mode 4 is where what you call as temporary movement of natural persons, TMNP. And this is movement of natural persons, largely professionals, but the frontiers are shifting, and one can always look into other skill spectrums. But this is basically people providing services from one country to another country, going from country A to country B. So a teacher or a doctor or an accountant or a computer software engineer goes from one country to another country for say 3 months or 6 months or a year, develops a product, receives earnings, and comes back. So this temporary movement of people from one country to another country, which is movement of natural persons, as technically it is called, is mode 4. So you would have realized that mode 1 is where products are crossing borders or digital services are are provided. Mode 2 is consumption abroad, students and tourists. Mode 3 is capital, you know getting transmitted from one place to another into a service venture. And mode 4 is when people you know go from one place to another place to provide services and earn income out against providing their services. So it is this mode 4 which I was trying to highlight, how this can be emphasized upon within a free trade agreement of India with other countries, especially with countries where demographic structure is such where you have a larger proportion of aging population and you require younger population to give services. So because it is part of mode 4 of trade in services, this can very well fit into an agreement of free trade agreement, which India signs in a comprehensive manner. So a comprehensive trade agreement uh, becomes very important in the post-pandemic times, whereby India can actually become a source of mode 4 kind of professional services and skill exports from India to other countries where there is demand and there is a complementarity between India and those other countries. So I wanted to highlight this because in the post pandemic times, it is very important to understand that there are various businesses that are not doing well and are not expected to do very well. So, for instance, tourism, travel, and the hospitality sector is badly hit. Many of the services that are associated with these sectors are also badly hit. Just to give you an example, when tourism goes up, you will have demand for more hotels, more cabs, more ATMs, more eating joints, and so on. So if tourism is hit, then we should not feel that it is only tourism sector which is getting adversely affected, but it also has, just as in the positive sense tourism has a multiplier or force multiplier effect, in the downside situation in this pandemic and post pandemic, where we do not see immediate increase in tourist activity and travel activities, uh, many areas that are associated with this sector would be adversely affected. And therefore, my emphasis on employment and also profit, becomes very important. And seeing these issues not only from a domestic national perspective, but combining it with an international perspective would be a great opportunity, not only for India, because what I highlighted was a framework of complementarity. So what we have, perhaps others do not have, and that is what demand and supply match does. That is what complementarity, trade complementarity actually means. So what I'm saying is, it is not only in the interest of India to create employment within our own country, but also with the help of other countries, whereby other countries also require perhaps a good, uh, you know, uh, demography like India, which will be helpful to sustain their own economic growth and development, and it will be useful for their corporations earning profits as much as it is important for our corporations earning profits. So a harmonious blend of wages and salaries rising through employment generation, and also opening new avenues to create and also sustain the earlier businesses with the help of a large skilled workforce which is employable both within India and abroad. Now, uh, uh, one or two points I wanted to touch upon when we are talking about trade and international economics. The crisis of WTO at the multilateral level. Uh, we are all aware that WTO has been going through some kind of an existential crisis, because in December 2019, there were issues with respect to appointment of appellate body members of the dispute settlement mechanism in WTO, and one country did not allow that to happen, whereby the appellate body, which is the jewel in the crown of WTO, doesn't function. As you know, one of the important uh, success stories, or perhaps the most important success story of WTO's existence, has been a very well functioning dispute settlement mechanism, whereby the verdicts of the trade court of WTO are legally binding in countries, and countries adhere to that. And this was functioning very well. And that made WTO what WTO is, and perhaps that gave hope uh, to countries like India and other developing countries, that at least we have a dispute at redressal system at the multilateral level, and such a thing is important to have, because this will always help to have a semblance of normalcy in trade relations and trade regimes across countries over a period of time. But this somehow collapsed. The appellate body mechanism collapsed. It is in a limbo since 2019 December, and there is a bit of a problem. Uh, but I always have a very positive way of looking at a crisis, and we should look at this problem also as a problem where, if we pull in our minds, we can possibly solve it. Now, if a particular country did not like the way dispute settlement was functioning, I consider this as a country raising dispute against the dispute settlement mechanism itself. Now, so because dispute settlement mechanism is about addressing disputes, if a country has its own way of looking at the dispute settlement mechanism and they have raised certain questions, that means they have raised dispute against the dispute settlement mechanism itself, and it is our duty to look at those points in a very objective manner. It is possible that, having looked at those points by the global community, everybody comes to the conclusion that the points raised or the disputes raised against the dispute settlement mechanism were not correct. It is possible that we reach that conclusion. But it is important for us to understand that we have to give assurance to other side also, that look, you have raised certain points and we are open to looking at your points. Now, that is the framework of cooperation that we need to have when a particular country raises a dispute and raises fingers over the dispute settlement mechanism itself. We all know dispute settlement mechanism has been functioning very well, but many a times it is possible that countries felt that it is not functioning the way it is functioning. And if also there are proposals to reform the WTO system itself, we should look at it with an open mind. It is possible that after having looked at it with an open mind, we reach the conclusion that no, WTO should not be reformed and it should continue in its present form. But to say that we are not open to look at the proposals of reform would not be correct. Similarly, there can be various, issues that can be tabled, and we might not feel comfortable, with those issues. But it is important to show our positive approach toward discussing, deliberating, and negotiating those issues. And if the outcome is not, for instance, say, in the interest of all countries, you say that, look, this is not acceptable to us. But my constructive way of looking at the multilateral process of WTO trade rule making is to look at everybody's viewpoints with an open mind, deliberate, and then once you have concluded that, look, this is what we feel about this, we are ready to accept this, and we are not ready to accept something else, we are ready to accept everything, or we are not ready to accept everything, whichever the case may be. After having analyzed it fully, you should be saying it frankly. So if I may just mention, uh, I look at various research areas which are very important for teachers and academic community of our country uh, to conduct research on. Now, some research will also require more time, maybe a year or, a year and a half to do. Some research can be perhaps done rather quickly in 3 months' time, 6 months' time. So I would urge the academic community that there are various themes, there are various issues that have to be researched, and good policy insights to be presented at various levels. The first level is, of course, for the policymakers of our own country, which is India. Second is, you can do research in a bilateral context. So, for instance, you would have realized, because I'm focusing more on the international trade and economic cooperation issues, you would have heard that India has been in talks with the United States, Canada, West Europe, with Russia, the Eurasian Economic Union. We have been working in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and so on, Central Asia, Africa, Latin America. One set of research which I said was to highlight in the national context the Atmanirbhar Bharat and its external dimensions. And I think I elaborated how to prepare a template. And in that, a lot of inputs and research papers can go in. Second is in the context of India's engagements with the world, whereby North America with US, Canada, Latin America. Within Latin America, we have different countries, Brazil, and a small country like Bolivia or Venezuela or Mexico or Chile. Then Africa, again, you have a continental free trade agreement in Africa, but then you have small groupings as well. You have bilateral, linkages. Recently, we concluded India Mauritius agreement. Then we have announced recently India UK trade agreement and enhanced trade partnership, which will culminate into a comprehensive free trade agreement in due course. We have also had a summit with the European Union recently. You also must be aware that we are engaging with the Central Asian and West Asian region, and we have a supply chain resilience initiative with Australia, Japan as well. And therefore, in a bilateral context, and that is where, if we at the Center for Regional Trade can be of any help, we would be glad to collaborate with researchers, because that is what we would be doing in due course, to have collaborative research so that well-informed policy making is facilitated in future, just as it has been done in the past. So the bilateral context is this other context. The third context, as I also mentioned, it was part of this, is a regional context whereby, somebody can focus on South Asia. Now, as you know, because of problems with one country, the South Asian Economic Region is still, its integration is far below potential. And I give the highest weightage to research in terms of a cohesive and economically prosperous South Asian region, whereby trade, investment, technology, and people play an instrumental and positive role to bind the South Asian region in a cohesive economic, cultural, and social unit. That's very important to have peace in your neighborhood. And therefore, regional focus with Africa, with Latin America, with Eurasia, and so on. That is another area of research that we would like to interact with you always. And the third and the most important in my view is the multilateral level, where the WTO issues, the recent debate, or I mean, the theme which got into debate recently was the paper that India and South Africa had tabled in WTO for a waiver of intellectual property rights for vaccine and therapeutic and diagnostic, products in WTO, to be done by the global community. Now that text is there, but countries were opposing. It was a good sign recently when US said that they are ready to discuss waiver of intellectual property rights as far as vaccine is concerned. Then European Union also gave similar positive indications. So there again, the time is short and the art is long. And vaccine is only one component of the overall health and wellness in the context of pandemic. And therefore, the India and South Africa paper is focusing on vaccine, yes, but it also focuses on various non-vaccine health-related products, and it doesn't focus just on patent, which is only one of the intellectual property rights, but it talks about various other intellectual property rights to be waived by the global community. So this is again an area where we from the research community have the duty to contribute and bring some kind of understanding whereby the global community is enthused to cooperate at multilateral level in a manner that is in sync with addressing the humanitarian crisis. And I would end my whatever little I had to speak, I will end by reiterating that this cooperation on vaccine and the entire value chain of health related products, health and wellness related sector, including therapeutics and diagnostics, and not only focusing on patent, but also other intellectual property rights, I think is very important. And if we do not do this well within time, then it will give us opportunities to highlight, reiterate, repeat that this is a humanitarian crisis which is not being dealt with by the international community in a manner that it is considered as humanitarian crisis. And that is why I say this is a crisis of human values as well. And we must, as social scientists, reflect on this, write about it, speak about it. This pandemic has not come without reason. I have a feeling that this has a message for all of us at the humanitarian global scale level. So thank you for your kind attention.